This is a story about silence, the kind that doesn't scream but lingers. It lives in the sighs between sentences, in the glance a mother gives when her hands are full and her heart is empty. This story isn't about loud betrayals. It's about the quiet ones. The ones you survive with a smile on your face. The kind of story you don't know you're in until it's far too late. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories like this, please like this video and tell me in the comments, what city are you listening from right now? I'd love to know where this story is reaching. And to those who click the subscribe button, may God bless you with health, healing, and abundant wealth. Please share this channel with someone who loves stories too. Remember, the visuals on screen are only decoration. Let your mind wander, your heart listen, and your eyes rest. The story is meant to be heard, not watched. Now let us begin. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in after a storm, when the air still smells like rain and the furniture feels unfamiliar. Lorraine stood in the doorway of her daughter Madison's suburban home, holding a small suitcase that felt heavier than it should. Not because of what was inside, but because of everything she had left behind. 3 weeks earlier, she had buried her husband of 42 years. Robert had been the constant hum in her life. Gentle, present, steady. And now she was alone. Or so she thought. Madison had offered a room. A temporary space, she said. Just until Lorraine found her footing. A generous offer, at least on the surface. "Mom, you'll be more comfortable here," Madison had said, her arms crossed as if she were negotiating a deal rather than welcoming family. "It's better than being alone." Lorraine smiled and nodded. She was tired. Tired of the paperwork. Tired of casseroles from neighbors she barely knew. Tired of trying to sleep in a house that no longer echoed with her husband's coughs, footsteps, or humming from the kitchen. So she said yes. Oliver and Grace, her grandchildren, were the only warmth in this arrangement. They had thrown themselves at her legs when she arrived. Oliver talked about dinosaurs. Grace wanted to braid her hair. And for a moment, Lorraine allowed herself to believe this would feel like home. But as the days passed, that belief began to slip through her fingers. Madison was busy. Always busy. Zoom meetings, conference calls, fitness classes in the morning, wine in the evenings. When Lorraine asked simple questions, what to cook, where the laundry pods were, whether they should all eat dinner together, Madison answered without looking up. Or worse, she didn't answer at all. There were no framed photos of Robert in the house. None of the items Lorraine had packed with care found a place in the living room. Her presence was tolerated, not embraced. She was there to help, not to belong. She found herself waking before sunrise, making breakfast, folding clothes, wiping counters no one asked her to wipe. She wasn't just grieving her husband. She was grieving her place in the world. So she tried. She kissed Oliver's forehead every night and tucked Grace in with silly songs from Madison's childhood. She told herself this was enough. That being useful was better than being forgotten. That one day Madison might look at her, not through her, and say thank you. But that day never came. Lorraine sat on the edge of the guest bed, staring at her hands. They looked older in this lighting. Or maybe she just hadn't noticed the wrinkles until now. She had been someone's wife. She had been someone's mother. And now, she was a shadow moving through someone else's house. Silently cleaning up the pieces, silently disappearing. She told herself she was doing the right thing. But somewhere deep inside, something else was beginning to stir. The routine settled in faster than Lorraine expected. Mornings blurred into afternoons. Days slipped into one another like folded linens. She became the clockwork of Madison's household. Quiet, efficient, invisible. By the third week, no one asked if she had slept well. No one noticed when she didn't join breakfast. Her tea mug sat on the counter, untouched by anyone but her. She washed the dishes she hadn't used. She folded laundry that wasn't hers. Lorraine had become the gentle ghost in the background. Always present, never acknowledged. Madison had her system. Color-coded calendars, meal prep containers, appointments pinned to the fridge. Lorraine tried to follow along. She didn't want to get in the way. When she offered to drive the kids to school, Madison hesitated before saying, "It's fine, Mom. We've got a carpool schedule." When Lorraine made a warm stew, Robert's favorite, a recipe that once brought the whole family together, Madison took a spoonful, gave a polite nod, and said, "Next time, just something lighter. The kids don't eat much red meat anymore." So Lorraine stopped trying to cook anything with love in it. Oliver still came to her room at night, crawling under the covers and asking her to tell him a story about Grandpa. Grace painted her nails with pink polish and called it Grandma Spa Day. Those moments kept Lorraine going. But even then there was always a knock, always Madison reminding her that bedtime routines had changed, that screen time rules applied, that this wasn't the way things were done in her house. Lorraine began to understand. This wasn't her home. This was a station. A place to stop, to be useful, to be quiet. And the more she blended into the background, the more Madison seemed to prefer it that way. One night, Madison returned late. Lorraine was in the kitchen wiping the counter though it was already clean. Madison tossed her keys into a bowl and sighed. "Long day?" Lorraine asked gently. Madison glanced at her. "Exhausting. I barely had a moment to myself." Lorraine nodded. "Is there anything I can do to help?" There was a pause. Madison looked around then shrugged. "You're already helping, Mom. Don't worry about it." It was the kind of thank you that wasn't really a thank you. A dismissal wrapped in politeness. That night Lorraine couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the dishwasher downstairs. In the dark, she remembered the sound of Robert's breathing beside her. How even in silence she never felt alone. Now, surrounded by family, she had never felt lonelier. She was doing everything right. Everything expected. And yet she was slowly erasing herself. She didn't cry. She hadn't since the funeral. But she wondered, how long could she keep pouring from a cup that no one ever refilled? She closed her eyes. The house was quiet, and she was vanishing one day at a time. It was a Tuesday morning when Lorraine decided to clean out the old boxes she had stored in the garage. Madison had mentioned wanting more space for winter coats and camping gear, so Lorraine thought she could help by making room. Besides, it gave her something to do. Something that felt productive. Purposeful. She knelt beside a stack of cardboard marked with fading ink. Some boxes hadn't been opened in years. They smelled of dust, pine wood, and memories. One box in particular had Robert's name scribbled across the top. She hesitated, then opened it slowly. Inside were scattered items that only made sense to him. Old receipts, a cracked pair of glasses, paper clips, a baseball card wrapped in tissue, and an envelope tucked into the corner. Lorraine pulled it out gently. It was yellowed, sealed with a single piece of aging tape. She sat cross-legged on the cold garage floor and opened it. Inside was a lottery ticket. Folded neatly. No note, no explanation. Just the numbers. Robert's handwriting was faint on the corner. Bought at Fairway Market. Just in case. She almost laughed. Of course Robert would have kept a ticket like this. He used to joke about winning the lottery every time their car made it through another winter. Out of curiosity, Lorraine walked back into the kitchen and opened her laptop. She typed in the lottery site, entered the numbers and waited. A small box blinked on the screen. "Congratulations. This ticket is a winning ticket for the amount of $3,700,000. Please claim before the expiration date, October 22nd. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. She stared. She read it again. Then again. The breath left her lungs slowly as if her body didn't quite believe it either. He checked the date. It was October 18th. 4 days left. 4 days before it all disappeared. Lorraine closed the laptop and stood in the middle of the kitchen, unable to move. The house around her suddenly felt louder. The hum of the refrigerator, the sound of Grace giggling from upstairs, the echo of Madison's heels clicking across the hardwood. Her ears rang. She put the ticket in her wallet, tucked deep behind a coupon and an old library card. Then she made herself a cup of tea, hands trembling slightly. She sat at the table as the steam rose, her eyes fixed on the wall, unblinking. No one knew. No one needed to know. That night, as she tucked the children into bed, she kissed their foreheads a little longer. In the dark of her room, she stared at the ceiling again, but this time her thoughts raced. She could do nothing. She could throw it away. Or she could claim it. And with it, reclaim something she hadn't felt in a very, very long time. Control. She didn't sleep that night. She was wide awake. And for the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about what Madison needed. She was thinking about what she needed. The next morning, Lorraine left the house before anyone else had woken up. She didn't leave a note. She didn't bring breakfast to the table. She simply stepped into the cool October air with the winning ticket tucked safely in her purse. The lottery office downtown was quiet. Clinical. The kind of place where lives changed behind glass windows and numbered forms. Lorraine waited in line with her scarf wrapped tight around her neck. her hands clutching the strap of her bag as if it might float away. When her number was called, she stood, walked forward and handed over the ticket. The man behind the counter scanned it, looked up and offered a polite, practiced smile. "Congratulations," he said. Lorraine didn't smile back. She simply nodded. He asked her a few questions. She answered them. Her voice was calm, measured. She didn't feel joy. Not yet. What she felt was the sharp edge of something awakening in her chest. Possibility. She took the winnings in a structured payout. Quiet, discreet, untraceable for now. She used an old bank account she had opened in her own name years ago. One Madison didn't know about. She had only used it once, long ago, to save for her anniversary gift to Robert. Now it would serve a different purpose. When she returned to the house, no one had noticed she'd been gone. Madison was on a call. Grace was watching a tablet. Oliver was coloring at the kitchen table. Lorraine walked past them silently and went to her room. She sat down and opened her notebook. The first thing she did was write a will. She wasn't a lawyer, but she knew enough to start. She listed everything, every cent, every asset she now held. And she wrote 2 names, Oliver, Grace. No mention of Madison. Not because she wanted revenge. This wasn't punishment. This was preservation. She added strict conditions. Trusts that could only be accessed at certain ages. Educational support. Travel stipends. Enough for them to grow, to discover, to become who they were meant to be, without being spoiled and without being told who to be. She made an appointment with a lawyer she found online. Discreet. Professional. She scheduled it for the following week. She'd take a rideshare into the city. No one would notice. Over the next few days she began to look at her world differently. When Madison tossed her a dismissive "Thanks, Mom," Lorraine didn't flinch. When she was asked to pick up groceries, fold laundry, clean messes she didn't make, she did it without comment. Because now she wasn't just surviving the days. She was planning her exit. In quiet moments she browsed photos of Italy. Not tourist shots but real streets. Narrow alleys. Cafes with chipped tables. Markets where no one would know her name. She imagined herself there. She imagined being unknown. And free. And slowly, for the first time in years, Lorraine began to smile. Just a little. When no one was looking. The morning Lorraine left, she didn't slam a door. She didn't pack a suitcase with loud zippers or echoing footsteps. She had mailed a letter to the children, one each for Oliver and Grace, sealed with her handwriting and love, to be opened when they were older. She left them inside her locked drawer with instructions for the lawyer. Her plane ticket was digital. Her passport had been dusted off weeks ago. The only sound in the house was the coffee pot dripping into an empty carafe and the soft clatter of her shoes as she walked out the door for the last time. She didn't look back. When the plane lifted into the clouds, Lorraine stared out the window, her heart heavy and light all at once. The city shrank beneath her, the life she knew folding into itself like a letter never sent. And in the stillness of that moment, she let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding for years. Florence was nothing like Boston. And that was the point. It greeted her not with noise or pressure or schedules, but with slowness. With warmth. With the scent of bread baking in the mornings and old stone walls echoing footsteps from centuries ago. She rented a modest apartment on the top floor of a faded ochre building with shutters that creaked and a balcony just wide enough for a small chair and a potted basil plant. She didn't know Italian beyond grazie and buongiorno, but that didn't matter. The city didn't ask her for anything. It only offered. Each day Lorraine walked. No destination. Just the rhythm of her shoes against cobblestones. She wandered through open-air markets and listened to strangers speak in lilting voices. She watched artists paint by the river. She bought peaches from a woman who called her Signora with a wink. No one knew her name here. No one expected anything from her. In the quiet of her apartment, she read poetry out loud to herself. She cooked with too much garlic. She painted flowers on postcards and never mailed them. The money sat untouched in her account, except for the rent, groceries, and a pair of well-made shoes that fit her feet perfectly. One afternoon she found a second-hand bookstore tucked between a cafe and a wine shop. Inside she ran her fingers along cracked spines and yellowed pages. She picked up a novel she'd once loved in college and spent the whole afternoon reading it beneath a tree in a park with no name. The loneliness didn't vanish, but it softened. It became a space she could sit beside instead of something she had to escape from. She didn't think of Madison every day, but when she did, it no longer hurt in the same way. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't rage. It was something quieter, like a bruise beneath the skin. She knew Madison would find out eventually, and when she did, Lorraine would be ready. But not today. Today the sun hung low over the tiled rooftops. The bells in the distance rang softly, and for the first time in a long, long while, Lorraine felt like she belonged, if not to someone else, then at least to herself. Back in Boston, the days moved forward as if nothing had changed. At first, Madison didn't even notice her mother was gone. She assumed Lorraine was upstairs or out walking or maybe staying with an old friend for the night. It wasn't until the second evening, when the children asked where Grandma was, that Madison checked her room and found it empty. The closet held only wire hangers. The dresser drawers were bare. The guest bed was neatly made, tucked so perfectly it didn't look slept in at all. Madison stood there for a long moment, her arms crossed, her brow creased. She didn't panic. Not yet. She called Lorraine's phone. It went straight to voicemail. No message. Just a generic tone and silence. By the next day, the silence began to gnaw at her. There was no note. No goodbye. Not even a passive-aggressive comment about needing space or rest. It wasn't like her mother to disappear. Lorraine wasn't impulsive. She wasn't dramatic. She was dependable. Predictable. Madison went through the motions of her day. But there was a tension in her jaw, a restlessness in the way she slammed the cabinet doors. That evening, as she scrolled through emails, a new one landed in her inbox. Subject line: Trust notification regarding the estate of Lorraine Whitmore. Her heart stuttered. She opened it quickly, skimming the header, the formality, the legal tone. Then she froze. A trust had been created. The beneficiaries listed: Oliver and Grace. No mention of herself. Her name wasn't there. Madison blinked. Reread it. Then again. She called the number listed for the attorney. It rang twice before a calm male voice answered. Yes, Ms. Whitmore, he said politely. We were expecting your call. What is this? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. What is going on? I'm afraid I can't discuss the details unless your mother authorizes it. But I can confirm that the trust is valid. Everything has been filed properly. She left. Madison's voice cracked. Without saying a word, there was a pause. I'm not at liberty to say where she is, the attorney replied gently. But I can assure you, your mother made these decisions carefully. Nothing was done in haste. Madison hung up before she said something she'd regret. The next few days passed in a haze of disbelief and silent anger. She searched through drawers, trying to find any hint of where Lorraine had gone. Nothing. No addresses. No receipts. Not even a plane ticket stub. Oliver asked when Grandma was coming back. Madison smiled and said soon. Grace asked if they did something wrong. Madison kissed her forehead and said of course not. But the questions didn't stop. And neither did the silence. Madison poured herself a glass of wine that night. She sat at the kitchen table staring at the blank screen of her phone. Her mother had walked away from her. Just walked away. She wasn't ready to admit it out loud. But somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the layers of pride and routine and busyness, a small voice whispered, You pushed her away. The letter arrived on a Monday. It was hand-delivered by a courier wearing a navy jacket and a tight expression. Madison took it at the door, confused, and flipped it over to see her name written in her mother's handwriting. The envelope was heavier than she expected. Inside was a single page and a business card clipped to the corner. The letter was brief, polite. It stated that Lorraine would be in Boston for a scheduled legal meeting to finalize the trust documents. Madison was welcome to attend, should she wish to express any formal disputes. No other personal commentary. No apology. No warmth. Madison read it twice, her mouth dry, her hands gripping the paper like it might change if she held it hard enough. She showed up at the law office 2 days later wearing a sharp blazer and a rehearsed calm. Lorraine was already there. She looked different. Not younger. Not glamorous. Just different. Like someone who had stopped shrinking. Her posture was straighter. Her eyes were still soft, but there was something behind them now. Something steady and unshakable. Hello, Madison, she said simply. Madison sat down. She didn't return the greeting. The lawyer cleared his throat and began reading through the documents. The details were exact. The trusts for Oliver and Grace were airtight. Conditions clearly outlined. Assets protected. Every line signed, notarized, dated. And there is nothing for me? Madison finally asked, her voice clipped. Lorraine turned to her. No. Not even an explanation? I think the explanation is clear. There was a pause in the room. You're punishing me, Madison said quietly. For what? For being busy? For having boundaries? Lorraine didn't flinch. No. I'm protecting what matters to me. That's not the same as punishment. I took you in. You gave me a room, Lorraine replied, her tone calm but firm. Not a place. Not respect. I gave and you didn't even see me. Madison opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence grew long. The lawyer cleared his throat again. Ms. Whitmore, do you wish to file a formal contestation? Madison looked down at the paper in front of her. She had come here to argue. To fight. To demand what she thought she was owed. But now, sitting across from her mother, who looked more composed, more certain, more alive than she had in years, something in her cracked. No, she said finally. Not today. The meeting wrapped. Papers were signed. The attorney gathered his things and left the room, leaving the two women alone. Lorraine stood. Madison didn't. She stared at the grain of the wooden table. Did you ever love me less? She asked, barely a whisper. Lorraine placed her hand on the back of the chair. Not touching, not reaching. Just steady. No. But I loved myself too little for far too long. She walked out of the room without waiting for a reply. Madison stayed seated. She didn't cry. He just sat there, surrounded by legal paper, silence, and the weight of a mother's goodbye that didn't need a single door to be slammed. The letter arrived 2 weeks later. Cream-colored paper. A return address from Boston. Lorraine found it in her mailbox one crisp Florentine morning. She held it for a long time before opening it, standing barefoot on the tiled floor, steam rising from her teacup on the windowsill. Inside were only a few sentences. I've had time to think. You were right. I'm sorry for how I made you feel. If there's ever a chance, I'd like to talk, when you're ready. No signature. No drama. Just silence wrapped in ink. Lorraine folded it once, neatly, and set it down beside her breakfast. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. Later that day, she pulled out her own stationery and wrote a reply. Her handwriting was deliberate, each word chosen with care. I received your letter. If you come as my guest. Bring only kindness. Leave behind expectations. You may not find the mother you once knew, but you will find a woman who remembers how to live. She mailed it the same afternoon. Then she walked to the market, bought a bundle of fresh basil, and returned home to make lunch. The sun was beginning to stretch longer over the city. In the evenings, she sat on her balcony, watching the golden hour melt across the rooftops of Florence. Sometimes she read. Sometimes she just breathed. Children played below in the cobbled alley. A couple laughed over clinking glasses. The world didn't need her to be anything today. She was no longer waiting to be chosen. She had chosen herself. The room inside her heart that had once been reserved for someone else, dutiful daughter, faithful wife, selfless mother, was no longer a vacancy. It was hers. To decorate. To fill. To protect. There would be no dramatic reunions. No movie scene embraces. Just a letter sent. A door unlocked. A place at the table if it was ever deserved. She looked out over the city and closed her eyes. The bells rang in the distance. And this time the silence around her wasn't empty. It was hers. It was peace.